Welcome to the Smack Happy Design Videocast, where we explore all things web and marketing. With your hosts, Nicole and Danielle.
Hello, welcome to episode number 25. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Danielle.
And I just want to remind our audience that we'll be taking some notes for you. So if you want to sit back, relax, and just listen, you can download the notes at smackhappy.com/videos. And today our guest is Chris Michael Harris, a serial entrepreneur and host of the podcast show Entrepreneur Hour. Welcome, Chris.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Hey.
For joining us.
Yeah.
You want to give us a little more background about who you are?
Totally. So kind of an entrepreneur before I knew what that word, I feel like in the last 8 years or so, entrepreneurship has become like really mainstream and sexy and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But, I remember growing up where like that was kind of abnormal, right? It was like you go to school to get a good job, you work your 9 to 5. And like, truth be told, even from early age, like 11 and 12 years old, that just didn't, like, I just didn't, the hour for pay model, like I always like innately saw the limitations that coincided with that. And so whether it was mowing the neighbor's lawns, I think in one summer, even as a fifth grader, I made like $3,000 or $4,000 just mowing everybody's lawn. I would go up and down my street, like all the way around, just mowing everybody's lawns for $25, $35. And all my friends were hanging out at the pool and like doing, stuff like that. And I was just like, I just saw the ability to really maximize your earning potential doing your own thing. Right. So fast forward to high school. A buddy of mine and I kind of, the sparks started kind of, popping up with ideas and what have you, started essentially more of an advanced lawn care type business. But we were doing, it was like we called it work for less. And it was basically handyman jobs and stuff like that. Whatever it was, could be edging, could be cleaning off people's driveways, pressure washing. And then that turned into, at one point, a family, an elderly couple hired us to do a $6,000 in-town move because they had such a negative experience with a traditional moving company when they moved from, I think it was Michigan to Georgia. So here we are at barely driving, right? Like I just got my driver's license at like 16 and taking in like $6,000 like moving requests. We were hiring our friends, we were bringing everybody on, we were climbing up ladders, cleaning out gutters and, just crazy stuff, right? And it was like, holy wow, I'm 17 and I have payroll. Like it's crazy, right? 16, 17, I have payroll. So I think over the course of that summer, we made like $12,000 or $14,000 with the big sum of that coming from that moving that elderly couple. They had a phenomenal experience with us. They felt like they was connecting with their grandkids. And like, we kind of saw just this power of really having something different than what your traditional blue collar industry offered. Right. So I get to college and again, now it's funny because conditioning and societal norms kind of pull us back to like on track. Right. And so I get to college thinking like, okay, that was fun, but that's not a real venture, right? That's not a real thing that I'm going to do in the world, like pursue it. That was cool. I made some money, but now it's time to get serious and focus on what I want to do. All the while still like inherently knowing that that's not who I am. I could have been anything in terms of my own perspective as far as who I am. Like I could have been an astronaut or I could have been this, right? Like no conceptual idea of what I wanted to be still. And everybody's there to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, to be a surgeon or whatever. And like, it was kind of, I don't want to say an identity crisis, but it was a really tough point in my life. And I got super depressed. And I remember I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I'm tired of being me. I just want to be like everybody else because I was so lost and clouded and confused about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to serve the world. And so that's a pretty tough place to be. Around the same time, we just like, by just the grace of God, the universe, whatever, we saw these two young females that lived in our apartment building. And they were moving lugging one of those big, like fold out sofas, right? Like the big heavy ones down the hallway. And in this building we lived in, it must've been designed by a kindergartner because the hallway stretched like 1/8 of a mile, it felt like, away from the parking deck. So when you moved out of that building, if you live with another female, that's a pretty tall order, right? That's or even a male that, isn't accustomed to lifting weight. I don't want to isolate it just to females per se, but it's a tall order to move down that hallway. And at the time, I had been doing some personal training. My brother and I were really big into physical fitness and what have you. And I just said, just out of the goodness of our hearts, we just said, let's help these two girls, right? And it doesn't help if you're a single guy to help out the girls in your building, right? Like that's never a bad thing to help out maybe the single females in your building. So the mom was with them. She appreciated it so much that she had no idea what they're going to do, kind of freaking out or whatever. She tipped us like $50 a piece for moving one single piece of furniture. It's like, we're onto something here. So seeing that as, a way to just make money while we're in school, we decided to take that on, and we went up to our lease office manager and said, can we do this in the building, just this building, and just to help people out, right? Well, she put up a flyer when everybody asked, like, hey, who do you recommend? She recommended us. That turned into like $12,000 over the course of the next 2.5 months, maybe not even, maybe a month and a half, 2 months. So that paid literally for my entire senior year in college, just that 2.5 month period. So I graduate, and I went on and got a sales job. Again, still thinking I have to go along the lines of what society says I should do, right? Got a sales job with a company out of Brookfield, Wisconsin. I was good at it. I enjoyed elements of it, but I think always knew that this wasn't the long-term thing. And I think what really solidified that in my mind was I had all of these innovative and creative ideas as far as things we should do, but the rigidity of that corporate structure, you could tell like the ships just turned very slowly, right? And so it's like you're playing the politics, you're having to slow down for everyone else to kind of catch up to things. And like I don't want to say the ship was sinking, they're still in business, but I saw that they weren't doing what they needed to be doing to be disruptive, to be the major thought leader in their space, right? And so to me, it was like, this is a problem, and this is not where I align myself. I'm very innovative and quick thinker, and I talk fast. I do everything fast, right? And so I think what the straw that broke the metaphorical camel's back was my boss, whose hair was as white as the wall behind me, basically said, you're not going to be respected in this. He could sense my ambitions and wanting to do this and do that. And kind of, I don't want to say skip the steps, but I think that's how he perceived it to be. But he said, you're not going to be respected in this industry until your hair looks like mine. And and I'll never forget, like, I remember what I was wearing. I remember where we were sitting. I remember what he was wearing. I remember exactly how he said it. Like, I can literally revisit that moment, because that was the metaphorical fork in the road for me. Like, what am I going to do, right? Am I going to stay miserable and pursue this path, or am I going to go down another path, a path of liberation, a path that's more aligned with who I am as a person, right? So I think within 2 weeks after that point, I just submitted my 2-week notice. They said, hey, thanks. Don't worry about the 2 weeks. You're done. And here I am, right? So meanwhile, around the same time, while I'm doing the full-time gig, my brother, so he's 2 years younger than me. So he had gone through the process of continuing our little moving endeavor, right? And so they did an entire summer, the transitional summer months within, whatever, May to August, or wherever you live in the country, those summer months, right? In a college town, that's a big time that people are moving, whether they graduate and they're moving to go to their big full-time job, or whether they're moving to a new apartment, or they just joined a fraternity or sorority, whatever. Like, there's a lot of moving and shaking going on during those transitional months. So him and now his new roommate, who, by the way, you talk about God in the universe, grandfather owned a moving truck. Okay. And he said, you guys are more than welcome to use it for free. Like, talk about falling right into your lap, right? Like, that's incredible. And it was insured and everything. So all we had to do was put gas in it, essentially. So I'm driving all over the country, doing my sales job and coming back for the weekends, because I'm being tugged in that direction, right? It's like society and norms are pulling me this way. The entrepreneur venture and the success we're having is pulling me this way. And I'm kind of in the middle somewhere. So they did like $25,000 over the course of that summer. And again, paid for the rest of their, I think my brother went out and got a new car. He paid for the rest of his school year. Like, they did really, really well with it. And I just said, you know what, this is it. We've got something here. This isn't the glamorous thing that I'd want to be doing, right? Like, I didn't go to college and get a degree to be involved with the logistics and I call it logistics to make it sound like sugar-coated, but it's a moving company, right? Like, that is not at all what I aspire to do in life. But I think one of the things you have to recognize as an entrepreneur is opportunity and traction. You can't ignore, right? Like, when you find you've got something, you sometimes you just have to go for it, right? And so I look at that now as getting my master's in entrepreneurship, because throughout the next 36 months from that point forward, we grew from that first year full-time in business. About the first 6 months, I did about $50,000, but the next 8 months thereafter, I did $500,000 in revenue. And then the next year after that, actually about another 8 months after that, we hit 1.2 and beyond. And we were doing business in 32 states around the country, working with 5 of the 7 major players in our space. That at that point, we were doing installation work. So if you look at any major MDU, so a multi-development property for off-campus student, housing, we would literally furnish those entire buildings. These could be, we did one in Los Angeles that was 11,000 pieces of furniture over 6 months, $130,000 contract, right? And so we're landing all these amazing opportunities all over the country, And we went from me and some hopes and dreams and maybe a little bit of traction to our name, to having 300 part-time employees in 32 states around the country, working with 5 of the 7 major players in our space. So it was rip roaring. It was amazing. And then around the same time, I said, you know what, we're having these amazing conversations and this is hard, right? Like this is really challenging what I'm doing here. And kind of realizing like every 6 months I'd look back and be like, wow, if I had only known this 6 months ago, I would have avoided all of these headaches, right? Because you realize quickly what little you know about entrepreneurship, right? You're like, oh, I'm smart and I went to school and I went to college, I have a degree. And it's like very little, if any of that applies to an entrepreneurial venture, right? It just doesn't. Like it just comes with experience. And I didn't have mentors. I didn't have accelerator programs. I didn't have any outside funding. It was me, some hopes and dreams, and a lot of hard work. And that was it. And so what you find is that growth trajectory, that growth cycle is really painful, right? It's you talk about growing pains. This was like growing death. Like it was agonizing. And so throughout that process, what ultimately ended up becoming my podcast was we were having these incredible conversations. And I'm like, you know what, if for no other reason, I need to record these conversations because someone else is going to go through what I'm going through. And I think it's part of our responsibility as entrepreneurs to pave the way for the next generations to come, right? Because as a society, I honestly believe this, and I see the world fighting about politics. I'm not going to get into that subject because that is what it is and what we're here for. But ultimately, I think largely what we're looking for are elected officials to change the world we live in. And I think what happens is if you want to look for that, look to innovation, look to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs fix problems. Entrepreneurs come up with solutions, not politicians, not bureaucrats, right? So I think that's a huge paradigm shift that we have to make. And it was kind of like my objective to help people do that, not only for the world's sake, but for their own sake in terms of independent freedom, in terms of financial prosperity and financial freedom and all these various things that we talk about in their buzzwords. But like really, how do you accomplish that? How do you make that practical and feasible for somebody to accomplish on their own, regardless of whatever space they play in? So anyways, so that was the point of the podcast. Within about a week and a half, 2 weeks of launching that in November of 15. So almost early 2016. We were trending top 5 in the world under business, health, and education on iTunes. And so we went from like, hey, we got 20 downloads today to like, holy crap, we got 10,000 downloads in the last 2 hours, like just amazing rampant growth.
Wonder what that's like.
It's pretty wild, man. Well, so when I can talk about that later, but it's crazy because I didn't have anything to offer. I had nothing to sell. It was just a passion project that turned into, I just reached out to Damon John's team, the Shark Branding folks. And I had a contact through LinkedIn with them, long story. And they said, yeah, we'd love to have him on your show to take advantage of that moment in time where I was trending so high. So we got Damon. I have Barbara Corcoran coming on my show tomorrow. I've had like 30 or 40 New York Times bestselling authors. I mean, the people that I aspired to be like, right? The folks that I read their books and I somewhat idolized them and I look to them for answers. Like, it's amazing because I now have these conversations with those people. I have a relationship with those people. And at any given time, I could literally pull up and I looked through my Skype the other day. I was Skyping with my father and I looked through and I'm like, I'm connected with some pretty cool people. And I don't even use Skype anymore. But at that time, I was using Skype for recordings. And it was just like, man, like, is this real, right? Like, pinch me, is this real? So anyway, so back to my story. And I'm wrapping things up, I promise. So this happened and the podcast took off. Well, all of a sudden, about February-ish of 2016, I just noticed that it was taking a lot for me to, I'm very strict with my morning rituals and this and that or whatever. And I was finding that like, I just was having a tough time deriving any kind of meaningful energy to get through my day. That proceeded all the way through about May of 2016. And finally my wife is like, there's something wrong with you, like health-wise, like there's something going on. So we couldn't figure it out. We got a bunch of lab work done and it turned out like I was really in some bad shape. I had a chronic illness, some major digestive problems. My adrenals were shot. My thyroid was completely shot. It wasn't hardly doing anything. I had double goose eggs for my iodine levels for my thyroid. And so basically everything I was doing was based on sheer willpower. The other problem is that this was only going to get perpetually worse. So my father is a Crohn's sufferer for 35 years. And for those who don't know, Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disorder. It's a digestive issue. So I know I have the hereditary propensity to have something like that happen to me. Right. So that already sets you up for potentially something really, really bad. Like if it's not addressed. Right. And so based on those doctors' recommendations, we were in the middle of a Series A. We were raising 1.5 million for 25% of the business. And based on my doctor's recommendations, he's like, look, sell or close, because this could be cancerous in 4 years, literally, maybe less. And so, I mean, not to be gross, but like that summer 2016, like I could not go to the bathroom for like an entire month, like about half to 3/4 of the month. And again, I don't want to be gross, but like when that's going on, you kind of have to put precedence over, protecting your asset versus your business aspirations. Right. So as much as I loved, that was my baby, right? I always say your first business is like your first love. It's hard to break up with that person, even though you're not going to marry your high school sweetheart from middle school, or at least it's unlikely. And I think we kind of glamorize this whole, like, the Zuckerberg story. He started his first business and grew to blah, 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 and he's still doing it today. Like that is the exception, not the norm, right? So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that they go through things, and then their first iteration or their first business attempt is not what they end up doing down the road. And that was a really difficult thing for me to accept and embrace. So we looked at selling, but ultimately my wife and I were just like, look, selling a business takes so much, especially in that kind of a non-glamorous blue collar industry. We had done really well with it. The longer we waited, the more we were just going to bleed out cash flow and bleed out, our reserves. And it was just like, let's just axe it. Let's just be done. Let's sell our assets and let's just move on and focus on my health. That was about 2 years ago. I'm literally now like at the end of that health journey. We've almost completely reversed it, which is amazing because that doesn't happen unless you're really, really disciplined. It was a complete lifestyle change, very, very disciplined dietary approach, a lot of supplementation, and really, really intense regimen in terms of what I was taking. But anyway, so that's kind of the negative as far, or the I guess the blemish on my record, if you will. But it really gave me a good opportunity to kind of reestablish like what I wanted to do and kind of see that it was a blessing in disguise, because ultimately, again, that wasn't a business that I really, it was me getting again, my master's degree, right? And my MBA in entrepreneurship. There's so many bigger things that I want to do in the world, the way that I'm serving now, right? Like through my online business, and the other things I'm involved with here in Austin, whether it's accelerator programs or getting involved with the tech space and realizing the multipliers that are in play versus your traditional employee-centric, labor-intensive business. It's for the best. And I can talk about that more because I think people do go through those setbacks or failures, if you will. I hate the word failure, but for lack of a better term. So I'd be happy to talk about that as well. But for me, that was the last 2 years have been me kind of processing that and getting through it. All the while, though, I think, it was kind of like the lifeline was this online business, this growing and emerging online business that I've created, and recognizing that one door is closing, but another way more massive door was opening, and a way for me to serve the world in a lot bigger capacity than I was ever in that business. So anyways, that's kind of my story in a very long nutshell. I recognize I used up about 20 to 30 minutes of our time here just going over my bio, but that's as quickly as I could unravel everything. And the scary thing is, I know in 20 years, it's going to be even harder to tell that entire story, but that's kind of who I am.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's a story that definitely should be told.
Sure.
You've been through a lot.
Yeah.
And, you were talking about failures, and I think I've been trying to think personally in my life, and trying to think of like failures as something different. Like, like when you come to a plateau, like if you're trying to lose weight or something and you're just, it's not going anywhere. The dial isn't moving forward, isn't moving back, but you're like stuck, and it kind of like feels like failure. So it's almost like, when you're in that, you kind of explain like how, you got through that. You just had to stick with it and, continue to move forward. And that's really all you can do.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when you pour your heart and your soul into something, like you truly give it your all, it's just difficult to accept the fact that thing no longer exists. Like, so the other thing is I was having these amazing conversations. like it was funny because my podcast has become almost like therapy sessions for me, right? Like we're providing tremendous value, but it's also like I learn and I'm mentored by these people. I have their undivided attention for an hour. And like, I'm sure you guys feel the same way, right? But what I found, and this is an exciting new update for me. But what I found was that there wasn't a single person, not a one, that hadn't gone through almost an eerily similar experience. Now it didn't maybe necessarily have to be health, but it didn't have to fail in the ways that we had to close our business. But they all went through tremendous they went through hell and back to get where they were. And so now what's happened is that I've been, really flirting with this idea of writing a book, and we've got some traditional publishers that are interested in picking this up, and we're working over the next few years, but like really examining the struggle paradigm, right? Like, why is that such a rite of passage? Because you look at successful people, whether it's entrepreneurs or not, and they go through all these incredible trials and tribulations, right? Like, what is it about those moments that either define us or make us falter and we never like pick ourselves back up and move forward, right? I think we have that. We pass through that pressure cooker, right? And we either become a diamond or we don't, right? And maybe it isn't binary. Like maybe it's not that simple. And that's what I aim to discover and unravel in the book. But what is it about that? Like, is it something like this intelligent design that like we have to struggle to get through things because we don't appreciate? So I really am looking to examine that further and really unravel and unpack that, to your point. But yeah, it's something that I think is worthy of further examination, because in that moment when we made the decision to close that business, my world collapsed around me, right? And not only that, but you talk about identity crisis. My entire identity had been built at that point around this notion that I was a successful entrepreneur, right? And so your self-worth is wrapped around the fact that I have a multi-million-dollar startup and I did it bootstrapped. I didn't need anybody's help. I did it myself. And then, and to watch that just crumble in front of your eyes in a matter of 9 months is really, really tough. So that's what we're looking to take with that story. Obviously, we produce that and publish that content on the podcast, and I talk about it at length. And so to be fair, I haven't talked about the full story just yet, and I haven't done so here either. And there's a reason for that. And it's kind of there's some things and details about it specifically that we're saving for later points in time, not due to there's some ramifications involved with that. But anyways, but yeah, so that's a story we're looking to tell. And I think it's going to be one that people really want to hear. And hopefully it helps them go through that journey and recognize that, like, look, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And you're going to be better off for it as a result. I've grown more in the past 2 years as an entrepreneur without that business, or without that business, or a business in general, if you don't count the online business. But I've grown more in those 2 years through this process than any other time in my entrepreneurial journey.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. So to grow, you need to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
So you were talking about bootstrapping.
Yep.
Right. So for the entrepreneur or the person who's thinking about becoming the entrepreneur that they want to be, what is your advice about, kind of whether, I don't know what the question is, but like, bootstrapping versus
raising money.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mentioned to you guys before we started recording, this is a debate that I have if not on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, at least once a month, right? As far as like, should I raise money? Should I bootstrap for a little while? Is it a combination of the two? So I think let's go back to, first of all, what it is you aim to accomplish in your business, right? So let's say you're trying to build the next major social platform. And again, that's kind of saturated, but whatever, for the sake of our conversation, let's say you're trying to build the next social platform to compete with Facebook, right? Or you want to be acquired by Facebook. That's a tall order, right? So you may not have the skills, or there may be I don't want to say FOMO. I hate when people do things out of FOMO, but capitalizing on the opportunity in the market at that specific moment in time, right? It's kind of essential that you go at it with everything you've got, right? So it really depends on, in my view, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if it's a lifestyle business, like I've seen people build multi-7-figure SaaS platforms, right? But the strategy is not to get acquired. The strategy is not to force an M&A. The strategy or the long-term goal is to build a healthy lifestyle business for themselves, right? They already have a lot of the basic skills. So it's more of a marathon versus a sprint. And to some degree, I think that's also what the people that raise money, they need to view it that way as well, because I think the reasons for them raising money are the wrong reasons, right? So if it's a tall order, yes, but I think you also have to check yourself and say, am I just being lazy, for lack of a better term, because I don't want to do the work, right? So I always recommend to people, before you ever take on funding, you need to have a macro level understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So I see these young startups, and I work with a lot of them through Founder Institute here in Austin, and the goal, right? Like the success in their mind is to raise money. They have no idea what they're going to do with it. They have no resources. They have no education in terms of going through a really intense accelerator program. I can't get started until I raise money. That is a false narrative. You can absolutely get started. I can't tell you the amount of things in line with the move. So one of the reasons why the moving company was able to grow so quickly, and when we do an installation work and all that, is because we literally created, it would blow your mind if I showed you the amount of automations and the systematic systems and processes that we built on the back end of our business, like how the business was ran, right? So like I'm trying to think of a good example that I could give you guys. So we had a completely automated hiring and onboarding process. So they went through and it was graded for them versus someone having to sit there and like actually go through and look at their responses. And it was based around our core values of the company. The people, instead of having to call in and request a quote, they could fill something out that gave them a quote within about 10 to 15 degrees of accuracy. And so that basically got our window shoppers off the phone so that serious customers could be on the phone, right? Whether it was our field service, like FAQ. So if the guys are in the field and they're trying to do something and they don't know how to approach it, we actually broke down every single specific attribute of a piece of furniture. They would basically X off what attributes that furniture item entailed, and it would give them a specific set of instructions that populated underneath with videos on how to do that. So they're not calling back into the office saying, how do I do this? It's like, log in, go to your resource platform and look through. So if it has glass, you're going to check glass. If it has fine finished wood, you're going to click fine finished wood. If it has assembly, disassembly, and then all three of those items would populate underneath and show them exactly how to approach that specific item. Whether it's a coffee table, whether it's a kitchen table, whether it's like, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter the item. It's the attributes that coincide with that. So it was a very, very systematic approach to providing the resources you need to grow. So the reason I say that is this: if I had gone and just gotten funding, which that business did require funding, and that was a key mistake that I made, by the way. When we grew from year 1 to year 2 and grew by 1,000%, right? We hit $500,000 in revenue. That's a type of business, low margin business. Your expenditures are going to catch up quickly with the revenue growth, with those revenue milestones. Why? Because to take the next steps, growth requires cash. And in a labor intensive business, it requires even more cash, right? So having the foresight to say, we've bootstrapped to 500,000, now I need help. So when we got to 7 figures, what I realized is, holy wow, we're not ready for this. Having to scale back, build those systems I just said. And that's what I just told you is not even scratching the surface. I mean, the stuff we did was revolutionary. And that's also part of the painful part for me, is like that was going to allow us to grow from, a 7-figure business to an 8-figure and beyond business with what we built with those systems and processes, right? So I think a lot of people, it's impossible to know what the next steps are going to be until you have a basic understanding of your market, of your customers, of what you're trying to build, what you need to build, what it's going to require. And then it's just, the game is just raising money, right? And so I think when they get the money, the clock is now ticking, by the way, right? Like, these people are not your friends, okay? They're going to be tremendous. And when I say these people, I mean your investors. They are business people. They expect a return. They expect a successful exit, right? And so they're getting smarter. They're looking for traction. They want to make sure that you have a proven revenue model. They want to make sure you know what you're doing. They want to make sure you're an accomplished entrepreneur. How are you going to do that if you haven't done anything on your own? So I see these people that come out and they're like, but my idea is great. I'm like, dude, your ideas were shit. Ideas are worth shit. It's execution of a well thought out plan that's worth something, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to curse, but it pisses me off big time because I see these people that if I have had $1 for everybody that told me it's $1 billion idea, will you sign my NDA? No, I'm not going to sign your stupid NDA because your idea is crap and it's been thought of before. I want to see somebody that's going to execute on that plan, and that's all that matters. And that's what investors are getting wise to. It's not just about the idea; it's about they want to see, and that depends on geographically where you're located. There are definitely places in like I think Nicole, I think you're in the Bay Area. But there you see a lot of educated money where they're educated in a sense of investing in startups where they are going to write you a check if it's a really amazing idea and so on and so forth. But you're seeing more and more where there's a kind of a rite of passage, right? Like you have to go through a seed stage accelerator or an idea stage accelerator, then a seed stage accelerator, and then there's a path to funding, right? And so you're seeing that more and more. And also I'd say this too, depending on the type of business you want to build. So I had a conversation recently with a gentleman and basically what he wanted to build was a content platform, right? It was essentially a glorified blog. And I'm like, what do you need investment dollars for? And he said, I need contributors to my blog. Dude, are you joking me? I was doing 2 podcast episodes a week and a blog while running a 7-figure startup of my own, like the moving company installation business. Plus I was deathly sick. Like, all that at the same time. And so I'm a big fan of essentialism, and I think you should limit your focus and your scope of what you're trying to do in your life and not taking on too much. But at the same time, he had no full-time job. He was just doing blogs. So there's this notion, a ill-conceived notion that in order to build a startup, you have to have money. And I think that's erroneous, right? So, but I think it starts with, what am I aiming to do with this? What's going to be required? And then what can I do to have a macro level understanding of what I'm doing? And whether that means I need to make some money first and then go for funding, because you're going to get a way better deal, by the way, if you are able to do 6 figures, or if you even if you have 10,000 people on your email list, right, that are interested buyers, that is only going to position you better. Because in my mind, it was like, I'm not a hoarder of equity, right? But by the same token, I'm also not trying to give away 75% of my company just so I can get started. Because to me, that means I now have a job working for an investor, right? And that is what it is. I mean, to a large degree, you are working for the money, and the money comes from the investors, right? So I think it's really analyzing your situation, recognizing like, this is what I aim to accomplish, something huge or a lifestyle business, really making that determination. But also understanding like, am I ready for money, right? Like, what am I going to do with this money? What's my plan with this money? And is that warranted, or is there other solutions outside of funding, right? So whether it's outsourcing, like I have virtual assistants in the Philippines. You pay them $3 to $4 an hour at most to do a lot of the work that needs to be done, right? So a contributor for a blog, that's the perfect solution. They can actually help you draft up content. Maybe you revise it and look over and what have you. That doesn't require you to go out and get a $200,000 seed round for a blog. That's ridiculous. Sorry for that guy who listens to this. But I told him the same thing I'm telling you guys, though, to be fair. So I think it's really, we've become so hyper-focused on the big raise and stuff like that. And you even look at a guy like Zuckerberg, like he waited as long as he possibly could to even have revenue models or take on funding at all, right? And so I think there's so much to be learned. It's not just about growing a business. It's about you growing into an effective and tactical entrepreneur that you need to take the next steps, right? So don't rush the process, determine what you actually need, and make sure that you're growing as an entrepreneur so that you're ready for the money. You're not just taking the money for the sake of taking the money. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really funny, like through the whole story that you've been talking about today, there are so many parallels to a lot of the things that a lot of the people that we've come across, I think, in little bit different ways. You know, there's the people that come and they have this idea and, you know, they want to do this and it might not be the greatest idea. And, you know, you try to help them figure out why it might not be the greatest idea and turn it into a better one.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of advice, like, what would you say to somebody who is saying, you know what, I don't want, there's almost a reluctance. Like, it's almost like people feel defensive, you know, about their babies, right? So they have these ideas and they get defensive. And like, what would you say to somebody who is going to jump on the defense as opposed to saying, okay, like, let me welcome these ideas and let me figure this out a little bit more before, you know, I kind of jump right in the deep end and try to, you know, figure it out from the bottom up.
Yeah. So it's funny you said, because that was my situation. When I decided to take on the moving company as a full-time venture, I went to this group in Atlanta called Start Atlanta, right? And so basically it was a group of people that were going to help you find funding and give you feedback on your idea. They basically literally told me, you are too smart to do this business. And they said, no one is going to give you funding for this kind of a business because it's not a technology play, right? Now, it evolved into having technology as a large part, a central focus of what we were doing. And the labor part of it became like a byproduct of the technology, essentially. And that was the long-term goal, by the way, as well. But I think the first thing to do is, if you truly believe that your baby is not ugly and everybody's telling you it's ugly, right? Keep pushing down that path, right? If you don't believe that, so it's not uncommon for people to go, I forget who it was specifically. I can't remember. I don't want to misquote and say something that's not accurate, but there's a lot of startups that have gone to like 2,000 investors and it took that long for them to get the funding. If you believe that your idea is worth $1 billion and that, you know, the road is being paved out for you and that somebody just needs to write you a check and that's the end of that journey for you, there's nothing I can say that's going to convince you otherwise, other than you just going and doing it and getting your ass handed to you a couple times, right? And so I think that's the path, and that's what happened with me. And then what I ultimately found was that I made some mistakes. I learned quickly that no one was going to fund this business. And then it was like, okay, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Because it's one thing, there's a clear distinction in my mind, the wantrepreneurs versus the entrepreneurs, right? So normally a wantrepreneur that goes down that path, eventually when enough people don't give them the money and they keep hitting wall after wall after wall, if they're not serious about it, if they just think the idea is sexy and cute, it's going to be dead in the water anyways, right? Like I've been involved with several businesses, you know, that have come a result of like my established visibility with the podcast and what have you, where I come in, I'm an advisor or in some cases even a partner of their business. And like, I can tell there's not that insatiable desire or hunger to be a success. Like if you're an entrepreneur, it's not a career, it's a lifestyle. Okay. So like there's something inside of me. I am unequivocally, categorically unemployable. I cannot go work a 9 to 5. It is against every part of my DNA, especially now. I mean, forget about it. Right. So if that's who you are, and it doesn't matter, right? So go pursue the funding. You don't believe your baby's ugly? Fine. Go prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Okay. But I guarantee you 9 out of 10 times, you're going to come back around 12 months and be like, oh, you're right. So you can waste your time or you can listen to people. And I don't want to say just listen to me. Go get other perspectives. Go talk to 10 really respectable entrepreneurs, right? And if they're all 10 telling you the same thing, it might be worth something, right? It might be. And if it's not, and here's the thing, and this is why I tell you to do this. Even if they're wrong, or let's say even if you prove them wrong, here's what you're going to find out. Those maybe the top 4 to 5 things that they're all inherently telling you. Those are the objections that you need to go work on. Well, I don't see how you get over X bottleneck, or I don't see how you get over this hurdle, or I don't see how you're going to do this without X, Y, or Z. Okay, so having those conversations is constructive because you're going to take all those things and be like, everybody said X, Y, and Z. Thus, that might be my focus. So then you come back to the drawing board and be like, okay, my baby is ugly. I wasn't able to recognize that. But now I have something, a framework that I can work off of. So those conversations need to happen regardless. You need to pursue those conversations regardless because even the bootstrapper on the flip side can sometimes get so isolated in a bootstrap. And this was me, get so isolated into solely bootstrapping that they ignore the resources, right? When I say I didn't go through an accelerator program, and I say I didn't have funding, I didn't have mentors, I didn't have a business coach, I didn't have anything. I don't say that as a badge of honor. To a degree, that was stupid. That was not a wise path for me to take because there's so many things that I could have avoided, or it could have been a lot. I don't want to say easier. I hate the word easy. There would have been less of a challenge for me to get to the point that if we grew as fast as we did, imagine what we could have done with the proper resources, right? Like that's opportunity cost. So I think those are conversations you need to have regardless, whether you're seeking funding or not seeking funding, or you're not convinced or you are convinced or whatever. What happens is through having those conversations and being plugged in with a community, going through an accelerator program, talking to mentors, talking to successful entrepreneurs, whether you're on one side of that spectrum or the other, eventually we kind of all come back in the middle. And that's why I'm involved with programs like Founder Institute, because we see them on both ends of that spectrum. And it's amazing how by the end of that 3.5 months, they're all like right there in line. Whether they start on one side or the other, they all fall right in line. So have those conversations regardless. Don't just listen to me, pursue that, and then see what happens and take that really credible information. Test your customers, talk to your potential customers about it, take that feedback, and then I think eventually you're going to come back and fall in line with where you should be.
That's great advice.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of a lot of parallels that we have through different conversations that we've had with past guests.
Yeah.
And, other business people that we've talked to. It's just, there's always an opportunity to talk about something with someone, and there's always people out there who are willing to listen and give you feedback, no matter if you're going to like it or not.
Totally.
I think sometimes people get caught up with the website stuff. A lot of people get caught up.
Yeah.
A lot of different things. And
Yeah.
I think, one of the goals that we have just in general is to say whether no matter what level of ready you are, or what your budget is or what it isn't, no matter what business you have, it's always important to just reach out to somebody who can give you whatever feedback. And granted, you might have conversations with people that, are not the right people to share their opinions with you.
Sure.
Maybe they're not the right people, but like you said, that's still something that needs to happen. And, you'll learn one way or the other, things along the way about yourself, about your business, about other people, about how everything works, how things don't work. And, it's funny because I think we all still learn every day. We say we're experts, we're professionals, we're this, but we're really still just, we're the same. We're all learning how to do this one day at a time.
Yeah. And no, there's no such thing as an expert. No such thing. The world evolves and moves too quickly for there to be an expert in anything. In my opinion.
For sure. Except for, I think my brother's age group, which is maybe 25s, 24s, where everybody is using buzzwords that I have no idea what they are now. I think I've evolved into the whole, I feel really old because somebody called me this the other day and I have no idea what it means. And I had to look it up on Urban Dictionary, and I was like, oh, that wasn't a really nice word, but
yeah, sure.
I got past it. But
yeah, the other thing I would say, well, sorry, I'm totally hijacking your thought. Finish what you were saying.
No, I'm good.
Okay. The other thing I would say too is, and this was paramount for me to make this pivot and this shift. And so I am a large part of what I do also is not just the X's and O's business, right? So like and there's some exciting stuff we're doing. We're launching an entire new membership site that's going to have all of these X's and O's and resources, but it's also going to include a lot of things I do for like performance training and I don't say performance like just do more work. I mean, like from a psychological stance. So I'm huge into biohacking and mental hacking and things of that nature. And I know hacking kind of gets a negative connotation in this day and age. And that is one of those buzzwords that you're talking about, actually. But there was a lot that was going on with me psychologically, right? So there were some issues with my emotional brain that were causing me to take a defensive stance when people told me my baby was ugly, right? It wasn't because I wasn't able to cognitively recognize that the business indeed was ugly. It was something inside of me at a psychological level that was manifesting itself and rebuking that because of something with me, not because of the business, right? And so a large part of what I've done in retracing my steps for my first business is like, how much did I get in my own way, right? And so I think a lot of times what you'll find is that these people, they're not addressing we all have baggage, right? So like I think mental health in a lot of cases gets such a negative ding because it's like, oh, what's wrong with you, But like, to me, it's no different than being like, hey, you know what? I have digestive problems. Like that's just a part of who I am, right? And that's going to be for my life, right? So having some kind of stuff you've experienced in life, like whether it's little T trauma or big T trauma or whatever, or maybe it's the way you were brought up, making the mental shift from being in a 9-to-5 for so long in corporate space and then becoming an entrepreneur, like that's a huge mental shift. So I'm involved with all these things, whether it's EFT, EMDR, RTT, like all of these various ways to kind of reframe my neural wiring so that I have a clear mind and I have clarity and focus. And also I'm being very self-reflective in terms of the decisions and self-aware of the decisions that I'm making, the way that I think and why, right? And so I think that's something in an entrepreneurship space. I try to focus on the horse, not the jockey, okay? Because in my mind, you give me Elon Musk, I don't care what we're doing. Well, it'll be a success, right? Because Elon Musk, right? He is, and that's maybe not enough. That's not a fair statement because obviously, again, we talk about time and idea and, the marketplace and so on and so forth. But I would 9 times out of 10, maybe more, I would say that Elon Musk is going to be successful because Elon is something inherently about Elon Musk. So what is that, right? But I think a lot of that also when it comes down to the individual entrepreneur is where are you getting in your own way, right? And I think for me, all of my missteps, all of my mishaps, all of the places where I zigged instead of zagged, right, when I should have, it came down to something, whether it was a hyperachiever, whether it was a high controller, whether it was all these various things from a mental, psychological standpoint, where I was my own undoing, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I try to focus on with a lot of my programs and things that we do now is, dude, what's going on here? This is the most, I don't care about the hours you're working. I don't give a shit. I don't care if you're working, if you can get it done in 4 hours, great. If it takes you 18, I think that's a problem. I think you're not being efficient, but what's going on here? Because if it's something going on here, I don't care how many hours you're working. I don't care how hard you're working. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Throw it out the window. If you don't have what's going on here, and for those that are listening audio, not in video, talking about your brain, talking about that gray matter between your hairy ears, okay? Whatever's going on in there, if you haven't resolved it, the more, and this is a false narrative, and we all tell ourselves this. We think this success is a destination. We think once we get to 10 million, we can address these things and we can take the vacations. Happiness is not a destination because the more you grow and the further along you are in your journey, the more these things, again, that gray matter in between your ears, those things start popping up. Those buttons get triggered. Those buttons get pushed because those stressors and those pressures that you have become even more real and it's going to be magnified. There's nothing that's going to magnify your problems more than an entrepreneurial venture, in my personal opinion.
That is very true.
That is very true. So for all the people listening, watching, I don't know what else you'd be doing right now. I think that it's good to think about on top of all this, and especially for this conversation, I think this question is an extra fun question because and thinking of it in entrepreneurial fashion.
Yep.
So what is it for you that inspires you the most?
Yeah. So I've had this idea, and it's a radical idea, that since I was very young, and my mother, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again for the sake of our conversation. My mother was like, I don't want to say appalled is probably the wrong word, but for lack of a better term, she was shocked that I said what I said. And again, I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I would tell her that like I wanted to change the world, right? And in whatever capacity that I have the ability to do so now. Like, you know, obviously when you're a child, I love to analyze and think about the things that I wanted as a child, because a child knows no boundaries, a child knows no limitations, and ultimately what you find is that the child is really the truest version of ourselves, right? Because we're allowed to dream, right? It's not stupid to dream. It's not silly to dream. And so I've thought about that a lot. And part of my story that I didn't tell, and this kind of really solidifies it all, is when I was in 4th grade, there was an umpire that passed away in the middle of a Cincinnati Reds baseball game, opening day. And I lived in Cincinnati at the time. And I rushed home. I played baseball. I was a big baseball fan, whatever. And this guy had a heart attack in the middle of the game and died. John McSherry. And you can Google and look it up. I was like the Cincinnati fans, when they canceled the game for obvious reasons, the Cincinnati fans who had taken off work and pulled their kids out of school for opening day booed the decision to cancel the game. Well, immediately in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this guy has a family. This guy has kids. This guy has a girlfriend, wife, well, like whatever. I don't know his situation, but he has loved ones. He has a mom, he has a dad, just like everybody else, right? A brother, sister, you name it, cousins. And they just saw the entire city, or a good portion of it, 50 some odd, 30,000, whatever, thousand people in Cincinnati, just literally boo over the fact that they canceled a stupid game over this guy losing his life. Right. So that night I couldn't sleep. And when I asked my mom, I was like, what can we do? I was like, what if we have my whole elementary school, make them sympathy cards, right? Send it to their family. We figured that out. And this is pre 9/11. This was like 96, 97. So you could still get away with stuff like this. So my mom called into the Reds box office, and we got his family's address, and we didn't get the whole school. I think we got the whole grade. I know we got the whole grade. Maybe it was just my class. I think it was the whole grade to send sympathy cards. Yeah, it was a whole grade. There was a whole grade. The whole grade sent sympathy cards, construction paper sympathy cards to the family, right? So they received this massive box of sympathy cards from these 4th graders. 4th graders. I was thinking it was a 3rd or 4th. It was definitely 4th because I'd missed it. Anyways. So they sat there for hours and read them, and we were crying, and it was a very emotional time. They just got back from the viewing. And so she's like, I want to do something for these kids. Right. So they called the Reds box office. They got us tickets. They're trying to get tickets for the whole grade. This is where I was getting confused. It was for the whole grade. My whole class ended up going on a field trip to a Reds game. Right. We got VIP. We got to go meet all the players and all the umpires. It was all over. I was in Reader's Digest. It was all over ESPN. It was all over the local news outlets. It was everywhere. Right. And so the reason I tell you that story, and it became like a big deal, it was like, the kid with the golden heart or whatever. It was pretty cool. It was like my moment of fame, so to speak, as a kid. And that's really cool. Like the people were calling the house, and it was like, I can't believe you're on TV. And so anyways, the reason I cite that story is because I realized at a very early age how little it takes for one person to make an impact in the world. Right. And so for me, it's, if I did that then, right, and this got on the news and it got all this publicity, and and it helped these people's lives, and this story was used in a sermon. I Googled it at one point. It was used in a sermon at a church. A lot of people, like, probably thousands of people read the Reader's Digest article, and in some way, I can only assume that it changed, or even temporarily made them think a little bit differently. Or I don't want to say change their life. I don't want to give myself that much credit, but it's possible that it for a moment in time, it inspired them to think about something other than what was going on in the world around them that was so negative, right? So I was thinking to myself, like, I always remind myself of that story, because like, if I was able to make that kind of noise, right, as such a young child, like 11 years old or however old I was, right, 10, 11, imagine what I can do as a fully grown, fully functional adult human being with a platform that reaches over 130 countries around the world, with businesses that can hire thousands of people, with all these various things. Imagine the change I can make now, right? And so I think for me, it's that it's not legacy, it's not fame, it's not glory, it's not all these things. It's like, did I leave the world and whatever that I can a little bit better off than where I found it, right? And that's so cliche, and I hate that, and I'd love to have a better way of framing it, because it is cliche. But can I impact people? Can I inspire them to get a little bit more out of themselves than what they're currently doing? If they're scared, if they're listening to this right now and they're like, man, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I know I want to be an entrepreneur. If this right now gives them the courage to finally pursue leaving their 9 to 5 and starting their own business, then this whole entire hour was worth every moment of every second of my time. Right. And so for me, it's not just, and it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be like, I'm not trying to have the superiority complex where I say entrepreneurs are better and we're going to save the world and change the world. Like, I don't think that's the case. I think everybody plays their role. And truth be told, if it weren't for the 9 to 5 people, none of us would have businesses, right? Because we all be crazy, right? Like entrepreneurs, we are crazy people. We're certified lunatics, and we need people to keep us in line, like normal people to keep us in line. So, but in whatever way I can, if it inspires people, and I look at a guy like Tony Robbins, I look at a guy like Brendan Burchard, and like, we've never lived in a time that's better in human history to share whatever unique message we have to inspire or to beget some kind of action or to push people towards a life that they didn't realize they could have. And so I think that more than anything else is what drives me, what gets me up in the morning, and what makes me always re-examine and re-exhibit what I'm doing with the one life that I have.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that was a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's okay. I think the cliche part doesn't matter when, the story means something, and it means something to you, and it means something to other people. And see, you're already.
Well, things become cliche for a reason, right? When somebody says, I don't want to be cliche, it became cliche for a reason because so many people are using it, right? like there was some purpose behind it becoming cliche.
Yeah, no, I understand. And it's funny to just like a quick thought before we wrap up.
Yeah.
We do, we as in all of us, we do these podcasts, we do these, we have these conversations with people about business and things like that. And, while somebody, in the moment doesn't think that this is a life-changing conversation or something, there could be something in there that resonates. And I think about my dad when I think about this, because he didn't really, and I mean, when he was, 30, there were no podcasts,
right?
Or, this wasn't a thing, you know what I mean? I don't even know if it was a huge thing to really be like, sort of like a speaker or, sort of an influencer or something like that. All of those things are very trendy now. And
there's a huge barrier to entry.
And he decided, long story short, that, he was done with the corporate world. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to pursue, his dream of just creating a business that he could hand off to his kids, that he could build something for them so that they didn't have to worry about what he had to go through going through all of this. And I think things like this, kind of insert these ideas and these inspirations or push people to do what they really want to do in life earlier, instead of going through that really miserable experience that he had for so many years where he, this is, everybody's story is different, but that just the whole point of this is just that, having these conversations and talking about this stuff, that's just a little bit of change for someone who might be listening to it. So
totally.
I appreciate everybody's thoughts in this conversation. It's good.
Yep.
Good conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you on the show. And can you let our listeners and viewers know how to find you?
Yeah. So if you want to, a couple things. If you want to listen to the podcast, we've actually started doing something a little bit different now with the podcast where we have long form blog content. We also have free downloads for every single episode, right? So if you go to chrismichaelharris.com/podcast, you can go to our website and look at all of the latest episodes. You also have the ability to click over on links to whatever platform you want to listen from. I don't plug one in particular, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, which I hate Stitcher. Stitcher to me is like the Spirit Airlines of podcast players. But like Castbox, whatever, YouTube, YouTube is a huge focus for us now this year. Actually, we're the end of the year, we're really including a lot of video content. We didn't do that before just due to bandwidth issues, but we're really going to start doing a lot of video as well. But if you go to chrismichaelharris.com/podcast to listen to the show, to check me out, Entrepreneur Hour with Chris Michael Harris. And we referenced today, we talked about the ultimate startup checklist. If you go to chrismichaelharris.com/USC, like Ultimate Startup Checklist, you can get that free resource. The other thing is when you download that free resource, we're actually in the middle of launching our membership site. So it's going to have all these amazing resources that include X's and O's, my biohacks, how to raise money, like all these various things that we talked about today, largely at scale, are going to be included in our membership site. So that's coming out in Q4 of this year. So when you download the USC, the Ultimate Startup Checklist, you're going to get access to basically our pre-order list, meaning you're going to get it at a discount. So the time is now to grab that. It's been up for a while, but the time is now to grab that, to get that additional, discount if you do want to join the membership site. The other thing that we've done is we recognize that. So I'm a voracious reader. Like, I read every single day, rain, shine, sick, healthy, it doesn't matter. I read, right? So we recognize that people, they know they need to learn, but it's really like a tough thing. They can't focus. They're like, what did I just read? Like, what did this page say? And I got to go back and read it over again, or they can't find the time to do it or whatever. And so what we've done is we've created essentially an online book club with my private Facebook group, the VIP room, where every month we go through source material. So whether this month it's essentialism, and at the end of the month, we're having a web class. So you follow along and read with us, and we talk about the book as we're reading it, what chapters we're on. So there's some accountability there. And at the end of the month, on October 31st, happy Halloween, we are doing our first web class, right? So you'll be able to follow along, and it'll be my major takeaways from the book, how you can apply it to your entrepreneurial venture, and so on and so forth. So that's currently right now. You can access that right now. It already exists. We already have like 100 and some people in there. It's $20 a month. And so it's super, super cheap. I mean, that's like a third of your cable bill to just have something that encourages and keeps you accountable to following along with reading and learning and growing as an entrepreneur. And as I talked about, horse, not jockey, this grows the horse. Jockey, not horse. This grows the jockey. This allows you to become a better entrepreneur, is investing in your learning. So those are the major things we have going on right now. We're always doing cool new stuff. Q1 of next year, we launch our first book, or we're working on launching the first book. Probably will be released Q2 of 2019. So those are major things going on with us, and I'd love to see everybody drop by and check those out.
Awesome.
All right, well, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on the Smack Happy Videocast. We aim to help elevate your business through real life experience and advice.
Until next time. See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Smack Happy Design Videocast. For more information and downloads, visit smackhappy.com/videocast, where you'll find more episodes and the opportunity to subscribe on YouTube or iTunes. You can also sign up for our newsletter delivered to your inbox monthly. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Again, that's smackhappy.com/videocast. See you next time.